Good evening, everyone. I'm Greg Jarrett in for Lou Dobbs. Breaking news tonight, Attorney General Jeff Sessions now launching a review into shocking allegations that the Obama administration let the terror group Hezbollah off the hook in order to secure the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. We'll have a full report in moments. Also, President Trump sealing his first major legislative victory with a stroke of the pen. The president today signing historic tax cuts into law. We'll discuss what it means for the Trump agenda with former Congressman Jason Chaffetz. And yet another win for the administration at the United Nations. The UN Security Council voting unanimously to impose sanctions on North Korea. We'll discuss the many accomplishments of the Trump doctrine right here tonight. Our top story, Attorney General Jeff Sessions ordering a Justice Department review of an Obama administration bombshell, the DOJ, to look in new allegations that the Obama administration gave a free pass to Hezbollah's drug trafficking and money laundering operations in order to secure the Iran nuclear deal. Fox News Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has our report.
President Trump gave a fist bump when he stepped off Air Force One in West Palm Beach today, the signature issue of his election campaign now codified into law.
All of this, everything in here, is really tremendous things for businesses, for people, for the middle class, for workers. And I consider this very much a bill for the middle class and a bill for jobs.
Democrats continue to slam the plan as terrible for the country.
Republicans took a victory lap because they successfully sold America's children's future by handing tax breaks to corporate America and the wealthiest.
But today, two more major corporations announcing tax reform-related benefits for workers. Sinclair and PNC joining Boeing, AT&T, Comcast, Wells Fargo, and Fifth Third Bank, handing out Christmas bonuses to some 55,000 employees. New England Patriots owner Bob Kraft telephoned the president yesterday to say he supports the bill, that it will drive economic growth, raise wages, and create jobs.
He's going to buy a big plant in the great state of North Carolina, and he's going to build a tremendous paper mill there, or paper products plant.
President Trump invoked the name of Ronald Reagan, saying his tax cut is bigger than Reagan's. Though measured as a percentage of GDP, it's not even close. And with the tax bill, President Trump claimed to have signed more legislation in his first year than even the historic frontrunner Harry Truman.
We have, I believe it's 88, which is number one in the history of our country. Second now is Harry Truman.
Tax reform behind him, the president will spend the week at Mar-a-Lago, looking ahead to his 2018 agenda, which includes rebuilding infrastructure, immigration reform, and welfare reform. President Trump wants to get bipartisan buy-in, so infrastructure will likely go first.
Infrastructure is by far the easiest. People want it, Republicans and Democrats. We're going to have tremendous Democrat support on infrastructure, as you know.
Immigration reform and welfare reform will be a much harder sell. And in a combative election year, Democrats are expected to give the president little or none of what he'll ask for. The 2018 elections were front and center the same day President Trump celebrated the passage of tax reform. The president huddling with Chief of Staff John Kelly, Kellyanne Conway, Communications Director Hope Hicks, Political Director Bill Stepien, former campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, and the Trump campaign Digital Director Brad Parscale. Sources tell Fox News the meeting grew heated when Lewandowski rang the alarm that the president was not being well served by the current political operation at the White House run by Stepien, and that changes need to be made. A day earlier, former Chief of Staff Reince Priebus told the president the same thing. Lewandowski also told the president that the Republican National Committee needed to do better. A GOP operative tells Fox News there needs to be better coordination on communications, that when the White House is in a political knife fight, it needs air cover from the RNC. One GOP source went so far as to tell Fox News the RNC is a disaster, that the president needs to dump that place and start over. Midterm elections in a president's first term are historically difficult, but Republicans fear a bloodbath next November unless something is done to change up the strategy. Greg?
John Roberts of the White House. John, thanks. President Trump today blasting the fake news media for failing to talk about many of his accomplishments at the end of his first year in office. we've compiled a partial list. In addition to scoring an historic legislative victory on tax cuts, the president repealing the Obamacare individual mandate, scoring a deal to open up Arctic drilling, a record stock market, the rollback of Obama-era regulations, a lot of them, nearly 1.7 million new jobs created, the confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Mr. Trump's travel ban is now in place. Of course, approval of the Keystone Pipeline and the president signing Veterans Affairs reform. A whole lot more. Our first guest says Mr. Trump has exceeded all expectations. Joining me now, former Republican Congressman from Utah, Jason Chaffetz, now a Fox Business contributor. Congressman, good to see you. So you think he exceeded all expectations, and Merry Christmas to you. Does that mean he surpassed low expectations, or he went beyond his very ambitious agenda of promises?
Well, look, in the first 6 months, it was a bit of a rocky start. In part, it was because the Republicans in the House and the Senate were doing a political faceplant. Basically, they were running into each other and defeating each other, even when they didn't need Democratic votes in order to have Republican victories. And so that is less of a blame on President Trump and more on the Republicans having all the levers of power. But somehow, I think, in its own strange way, the failure that was repeal and replace Obamacare got them to collectively come together, be united, and say, we have certain political death if we don't get our act together and pass meaningful tax reform.
Well, I think
the president lived up to everything he was supposed to do. Republicans
got hammered for their failure in repealing fully Obamacare. Yeah. So it was sort of a wake-up call to them, I think. So, look, everybody's talking about, wow, huge tax cut legislation that was passed. The president signed it into law. That gives him enormous momentum. That's the word of the day, momentum. Well, you know, you and I know that momentum can be fleeting. It'll evaporate like rainwater on a sunny day. Can he carry this forward?
Well, it gets much more difficult to come January 19th when you have to actually fund the government. They passed this continuing resolution, but I don't think many people are actually happy with that. Republicans want to institute their policies. Democrats want to thwart the activities of the Republicans. And you don't have the reconciliation tool where you only have to get to 50 votes. And so it becomes much more difficult, particularly in the Senate. And then when you take on some of the more contentious discussions like DACA, immigration, and how to fund the government, infrastructure is not going to be as easy as I think the president reports, because we just spent nearly $100 billion on hurricane relief, money that was needed. But at what point do you actually cut some spending?
Right, that's more relief, although some infrastructure rebuilding there that was destroyed. I want to ask you about the breaking news story tonight, happened just a short time ago. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is now going to open an investigation into this report that the Obama administration gave a free pass to the notorious terror group Hezbollah over illicit drug trafficking, cocaine in the U.S., as well as money laundering. What do you make of that?
Well, look, Politico, hats off to them. They've done a pretty amazing report with a lot of verification behind it. It is absolutely warranted because they need to provide Congress the documents that it's been asking for. But it sounds as if within the Department of Justice they were making progress on Hezbollah, which was basically importing cocaine to the United States to help fund other activities. And for that to be put at the brakes on it, I mean, that smells it's a lot like Fast and Furious, which we saw at the beginning of the Obama administration. Maybe they didn't learn their lesson. I don't know.
Yeah, how many lives were lost? How many people died of cocaine overdoses at the hands of Hezbollah? And President Obama allegedly said, oh, let's get them a free pass. No big deal. We really care about Iran. So it's pretty stunning report. Let me move on now. Much of the news, of course, this year has been the special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. How concerned are you that this special counsel himself, his team, is riven with conflicts of interest and the entire investigation is tainted by bias and maybe corruption, and that fairness cannot be achieved?
I think we have moved beyond the idea that bias, which I think is well documented and pretty well understood from very, very senior people on Mueller's team within the Department of Justice. I worry that we're into this collusion category where it's not actually Trump collusion with the Russians. What we're worried about is collusion with the Hillary Clinton campaign and an effort to not only take down Donald Trump, but trying to prop up Hillary Clinton. And then I also worry after the election, what did they do, particularly Bruce Orr and his wife, Nellie, the Fusion GPS angle. I mean, there's so many different facets to this story. And I've got to tell you, it is stunning, and it should worry everybody. That's not what justice looks like in the United States of America.
Does there need to be a reopening of the investigation into the Hillary Clinton email scandal, given what we've learned about Peter Strzok, who changed the language to absolve her, given his role in the Trump-Russia investigation, and then jumping to the Mueller investigation? This is a guy who was sending out texts of hatred and denunciation of President Trump, and at the same time avidly supporting Hillary Clinton. I mean, if he used political bias to interfere in the administration of justice, isn't that obstruction, Congressman?
Well, I have not been a fan. Yes, it is, by the way. I have not been a fan of opening up and putting into place another special counsel. I mean, how's the first one working out? I would hope everybody to understand that inspectors general come with a lot of weight. Michael Horowitz, who is the inspector general at the Department of Justice, has 450 employees, something like a $100 million budget. He's been looking at this since January. You have not seen leaks. They've been doing their work, doing their interviews, pouring over 1 million documents. They should be done by the end of the first quarter, and I think that will be the definitive view. It was an investigation that was asked for by myself when I was chairman of the Oversight Committee, and Elijah Cummings, who's the Democrat. We both jointly wanted to see what the Inspector General would come up with. Let him do his report. We got to get it out sooner rather than later, but it looks like it's, come March, we should have it.
Do you suspect that the anti-Trump dossier, funded by the Democrats and Hillary Clinton's campaign, was perhaps illegally used to gain a FISA warrant to spy on Trump associates at the hands of the FBI, doing the FISA warrant application and spying, and then used as the basis for launching the Trump-Russia investigation?
Well, certainly, if you listen to Congressman Jim Jordan and others, that has been the question. And when it was put to Director Wray, when it was put to Rosenstein, when it was put to, some very senior people at the Department of Justice, they won't answer that question, which should be the flashing red light that very well may have been. So it's a bogus document funded in part through the Hillary Clinton campaign, Democratic operatives. You have the DNC that's partially involved here you've got questions about that. And nobody seems to want to answer the questions, nor are they giving the House and Senate Intel committees the information that they need. Right. Again, another flashing red light.
Yeah, and a cover-up. And look, when a guy says, I know the answer, but I won't tell you, that means the answer is yes. It was used to gain the FISA warrant to spy on Trump associates. Jason Chaffetz, thank you so much for being with us. Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
We're coming right back with much more. Stay with us.
President Trump celebrating his first major legislative win, a tax cut for hard-working Americans.
They're going to start to see that because we're signing today. They're going to start to see that in February. The numbers will speak.
We'll take up the president's big victory with Steve Forbes. And 'tis the season, companies showering their employees with bonuses, all because of President Trump's tax cuts. We'll have more on Trump's soaring economy next. Stay with us.
Well, the Trump tax cuts already paying dividends for a great many American workers. Bank of America became the latest company to cut employees a $1,000 check in anticipation of lower corporate rates next year. Hats off to them. The president tweeting about the phenomenon this morning saying, quote, our big and very popular tax cut and reform bill has taken on an unexpected new source of love. That is, big companies and corporations shower their workers with bonuses. This is a phenomenon that nobody even thought of, and now it is the rage. Merry Christmas. Pretty good tweet. Joining me now, Forbes Media Chairman, Editor-in-Chief Steve Forbes. Great to see you, Steve.
Good to be with you.
When it comes to matters of taxations, I really think you are the true expert with a real encyclopedic knowledge of what systems work, how other systems fail. How do you assess this tax cut package?
This is a tax cut, despite all what went through it, that is going to do more good than harm. And the key thing, it lowers the burden on people, lowers the burden on businesses. We need investment, stagnated for a decade. That's how you get a higher standard of living. People will start to notice early next year, most people, not all, but most, that their paychecks are going up. And the good thing about having an investment-oriented tax cut at the beginning is that means their paychecks in the future will rise. So they won't stagnate as they've done too much in the last 10 years.
So when Democrats allege, and the media consistently repeats, that this is a tax benefit to only rich Americans, what do you say?
Talk to some people in blue states like New York, California, and some others, where their tax burden is going to go up a little bit because they don't have the deduction of state and local income taxes and property taxes. And the key thing is, are most people going to have more? And it's going to get the economy really moving. We've been going about 20, 25 miles an hour in the last decade or so. Now we're going to get up to 40 or 50. And what the Republicans should do, and I hope the president does it as well in the State of the Union, is this is the first of many tax cuts to come. Put it out there that there's more to come.
Especially when we see it work.
And the key thing, working, is not how well the federal government does. The federal government will do fine. Revenues eventually come in and always go higher. The key thing, is it good for the American people?
Right.
And one of the things that you're going to see pundits, we're going to have a delightful time seeing it, Greg, is explaining why, even though the tax cut seems to be working, it really isn't. Yeah. It's only a mirage. Your paycheck went up.
Why is it polling so badly? And I realize it's early. People may not fully understand the impact of the tax cut. But, you know, the numbers are not good.
No, and this is where the Republicans have got to get their messaging right, because what have people heard? Only thing they've heard is, yeah, corporations are going to get a cut. Everyone else's taxes are going up. Most people think that their paycheck taxes are going to be going up. So imagine the surprise in February when the opposite happens. And another thing that's getting overlooked, and it's just beginning to be discovered, is by taking away Obamacare fines for working people, $30,000, $40,000 a year. Young people especially, that's a $595 raise.
Wow.
That means something to people. They don't have to pay that anymore.
People at home may be saying, well, if you cut taxes, that means less revenue to the federal government. You touched on this a moment ago. I'd love for you to explain how in the long run, Treasury revenue will actually increase.
The only way Treasury revenue really increases without crushing people is when the economy is booming. Well, there's back in the 20s, John Kennedy's tax cuts of the 60s, Reagan of the 80s. Whenever you reduce burden on people so they can focus on doing real things instead of getting around the shoals of the tax code or wondering how they're going to cope with this regulation or that regulation, they do more productive things. And the only time for those who are focused on balanced budgets that we've had a balanced budget was in the late 60s with the John Kennedy tax cuts, and when in the late 90s, when we won the Cold War and the Reagan tax cut fruits were coming to full fruition, those government revenues really soar.
Right.
So you can do a few things right. You're already seeing the American economy start to respond. Sure. Stop beating on it, and by golly, people do things.
What I'm waiting for are the billions and billions of dollars in corporate money, which is held offshore because of the uncompetitive, prohibited high corporate tax rate, which will now drop all the way down to 21%. So what will happen?
What will happen is they won't have to leave the money over there because they're going to get punished. We're about the only country in the world that taxes profits you make overseas. If a British company, for example, makes money in America, they pay the American tax, but they don't pay British tax as well. It's double taxation. By removing double taxation, you're going to get a lot more money coming. You're not going to see companies like Apple, which has over $250 billion in cash. They float $100 billion of bonds.
Right.
Why? Because tax-wise, it makes sense.
They don't want to pay their tax.
It's insane.
Right.
So get rid of these artificial influences on behavior that don't contribute to economic growth.
All right. Now, the president is talking about infrastructure spending as his next big economic goal. That's an idea that's been largely dormant in 2017, understandably, because there were so many other things to get done. Good idea? Why would it be a good idea if it is?
Well, if you want bipartisanship, boy, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Nothing like throwing out money or having a dangling of money to get the juices of, yeah, we want some of that going.
Democrats, yeah.
Get some of that going. But I hope that, yes, so they'll do something there. But I hope they couple it with requirements that states remove barriers to building bridges, repairing highways and the like, so you don't have to wait 10 years of studies and commissions and lawsuits and the like, so you can get to it.
Well, President Trump has already been expediting the process for a great many things by reducing regulations.
Yes, and you see particularly on the energy side, where now we're becoming a global producer. We're now exporting natural gas, which is going to reduce the reliance of countries in Europe on Russia.
Sure.
So all this is good stuff. Remove these artificial weights on people. It's like, imagine trying to run a marathon if you have a 50-pound pack on your back. You're not going to do as well as if you remove the pack.
President Obama upped it to about 250 pounds during his 8 years.
Yes.
So
and
50 would have been great.
One of the things I'm glad the president's focusing on infrastructure is it means they're not going to focus on Medicare and Social Security.
Right.
You don't try to tackle those things in an election year. It's just going to be a loser.
Third rail, we all know it.
And there are positive ways to do it, not the root canal
all right.
work.
You're promising me you're going to come back next week and we'll talk about that. Let's do that.
Looking forward to it.
All right, Steve Forbes, Merry Christmas to you and your
Merry
family.
Christmas to you.
Thank you for being here. On Wall Street, stocks closed lower today. The Dow Jones 28 points down. The S&P falling 1 point on the NASDAQ, down about 5 points. Volume of the big board, not so much, 2.3 billion shares. All three major indices posting weekly gains, though, nearly 0.5%. New home sales hitting their highest level in a decade, climbing nearly 18% in November. And Bitcoin, we knew it was going to happen, didn't we? Plunging nearly 30% today so far this year. Bitcoin is up 1,000%, so you're still ahead. The Winklevoss brothers, I think, are doing really well. A reminder to listen to Lew's Reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. Coming up next, a win for the Trump administration as United Nations Security Council unanimously imposes sanctions on North Korea.
But for the international community, this is an unprecedented challenge from a defiant state. So we have leveled an unprecedented response.
We will talk about the many successes of the Trump doctrine with Cliff May. He's coming up next. Stick around. Welcome back. I'm Greg Jarrett in for Lou Dobbs. The United Nations Security Council today unanimously approving tough new sanctions against North Korea. The latest sanctions are punishment for the regime's launch last month of a ballistic missile that Pyongyang says is capable of striking the United States mainland. Both China and Russia joined in that resolution. It's a sign the Trump doctrine appears to be working. Joining me now, President of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Cliff May. Cliff, always great to talk to you. So the economic vice is tightening on North Korea. I mean, these latest sanctions block fuel, ships, workers. But the history of Kim Jong-un suggests he doesn't care. He doesn't care if his people are starving to death, economically deprived, living in poverty, dying. So what's the impact here?
We don't know, and I think, people think that North Korea is the most sanctioned country on earth. It's not by a long shot. You're right. Kim Jong-un doesn't care. On the other hand, at a certain point, if his economy is about to totally implode, if he thinks it's a danger to his regime, if he thinks there may be generals or colonels who are looking at him in a bad way, he'll kill them, of course, if he can. It could have an impact. Before you get to the use of military force, dangerous thing, you want that to be the last resort. So what's going on now is useful in terms of tightening sanctions. These workers we're talking about in other countries are essentially slave labor. They get sent abroad. The money goes to Kim Jong-un, not to the workers. We're going to cut off a lot of the oil, only 2 million barrels annually, if my understanding of the new sanctions is correct. And then and vessels that are violating sanctions can be seized. This is going to take a while, but before it really comes to fruition. But it's important that we try these economic methods first before we move on to the kinetic.
Are you satisfied with the way President Trump is refocusing national security and American foreign policy on American interests?
Oh, yes. I mean, that has to be, that absolutely needs to be primary. In particular, and you see this in his national security strategy that came out this week, he is looking at what threatens Americans. That's our main concern. And, well, it should be. It is a great problem that for 8 years, President Obama ignored the maturation of the North Korean threat, and other administrations before, I would have to say, did way too little about it. President Trump says there are those who are threatening us. That's got to be our top priority, especially if it's an imminent threat, though also if it's long range. In the national security strategy, he talks about two classes of nations, the rogue regimes, such as North Korea, such as Iran, and the revisionist powers, such as as Russia and China. This is coherent. This is realistic. This is hard-headed. It's important that America be powerful and play a leadership role in the world for Americans, but it's also good for everybody else, certainly for every free nation and everybody that wants to be free.
Real quickly, your reaction to the latest news that the Attorney General is now looking into the Obama administration, trying to kill Operation Cassandra, which targeted Hezbollah's operations here within the United States.
Well, look, good for General Sessions, first of all. As you know, Josh Meyer of Politico did a 13,000-word, really comprehensive, a big piece of investigative reporting. What he seems to have come up with is that Operation Cassandra, which targeted Hezbollah, Foreign Legion of Iran, terrorist organization also involved with drug cartels, organized crime, particularly in Latin America. And essentially, the Obama administration said, lay off, we need this nuclear deal with Iran. What happened, Jeff Sessions is now going to investigate. Probably Congress is going to investigate.
Right.
I'm hopeful this will be a bipartisan enterprise. I certainly am. And finally, I think that what should happen is that Operation Cassandra should be revived.
Right. And the prosecutions should go forward.
Absolutely.
That President Obama allegedly and his administration put a halt to.
That's right.
And there may be some other crimes that were committed in the process. We'll have to look at it. Cliff May, always great to see you. Thanks for being with us. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. You too. Merry Christmas.
We're coming right back with much more. Stick around.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is reportedly worried that Republicans might lose the House and Senate in 2018.
51-49 is a pretty tight majority.
Tammy Bruce and Dom Giordano give us their predictions for the midterms next. And this brave wingsuiter performing what has never been done before. We'll show you one of the most adventurous wingsuit flights ever next. We'll be right back.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell reportedly expressing concerns that Republicans could lose both the House and the Senate in the 2018 midterms. The GOP currently has a 239-seat majority in the House. Democrats need to pick up a hefty but not impossible 24 seats to regain the majority. Joining me now to talk about some of this, radio talk show host Dom Giordano and Washington Times columnist, Fox business contributor Tammy Bruce.
Hi there.
Good to see you both. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, Greg.
Hey.
So, Tammy, should the White House be increasingly concerned about this? Because historically, there is a backlash against a new president in the midterms.
Yes, and historically last year, Jeb Bush or John Kasich would have won the presidency. Things have changed.
Right.
And the attitudes of the American people have changed. At the same time, the GOP has been doing its usual screw-ups. You saw, of course, with the repeal and replace of Obamacare. That didn't happen. We've realized that we'd been lied to and our money taken and votes taken based on promises that were never going to be fulfilled. So there's going to have to be a lot of kind of a reminding of the American people by the president about what's at stake. So I also have a concern that the Republican majority in the Senate, maybe they don't really want to be in the majority. It would maybe be easier to just let the standard kind of status quo move along if the Democrats were in the majority. I don't trust McConnell. I don't trust the GOP. This is going to be, I think, a very important test for the president, but it's, and also for all of us who are here, maybe normally we wouldn't go out in a midterm, but this is as important as last year's an election.
Don, what do you think? I mean, the electoral map next year does favor Republicans, but you can't take that for granted.
No, not at all, Greg. And where I am in Philadelphia, the suburban races are incredible, and they've targeted some of the Republicans that are here. And these Republicans have, by and large, moved away from the president, made moves back and forth like that. And Pennsylvania is very volatile. So I'm more concerned about the House. I think the ground is good for the Senate.
Right.
But in the House, even though that's a hefty number of seats to pick up, there are issues. But if on the first paycheck in February, the tax cut, as I perceive it, is working and Americans are seeing more money in their pocket, and if the economy is growing in the manner that we're seeing, this is all positive terrain for the president and for the party.
Yeah. Tammy, in a tweet, the president said he's optimistic that bipartisanship can be achieved in 2018. Is that overly optimistic, even naive?
Well, I think that we've seen, interestingly with the president, a certain naivete that would normally not be naivete in business, where everybody's got the same goal, where everybody wants the company to be successful. In this case, you've seen this first year be some, with fits and starts of having to remove people from the White House and expecting more from perhaps a Mitch McConnell. That hasn't happened. He's learned a lot this year. When it comes to spending bills, he'll probably get some help because the Democrats love to spend. But I do think that he understands now that this is not normal business, but he will have to prevail. And again, just him waking up in the morning, we have a good economic news. That should be good for him. But we want to make sure that there's an aggressive dynamic for the Senate seats we need to take, the 10 vulnerable Democrats that exist there, but also for the House. I mean, this is it's like snatching defeat from the jaws of victory for the Republicans. We need them to want to win, and the president's agenda, I think, next year is going to be great. The Democrats are going to condemn it, but I think they're going to be losers in that regard.
Tom, you get the last word on bipartisanship. The president could endorse blue skies and sunshine, and Democrats will oppose it.
Absolutely, and I'm very wary, Greg, of all the infrastructure talk. I am the Amtrak crash out west was not due to infrastructure problems. It apparently is due to flaws, incompetency, human error, God knows what. I'm very, very wary of that top. Democrats are the adversary here at best, and they need to be defeated. We need more Republicans.
Yeah.
All right. Dom Giordano, Tammy Bruce, Merry Christmas. Thanks for being with us. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Greg.
Merry Christmas.
Be sure to vote in tonight's poll. Do you believe the investigation into collusion between the Obama administration and Hezbollah is proof that the DOJ is finally getting serious about draining the swamp? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Please roll the videotape. I love these wingsuiters. They prove that you don't need a parachute to stick the landing. Watch as this guy soars above Lake Garda in Italy before landing on the water without the help of a parachute. Wow. That's got to hurt.
I was going to say.
It's just got to hurt. I don't care what you got on. But way to go. Congrats. Coming up next, a father makes a plea to the White House to save his son from an Indonesian prison. The case has reportedly caught the eye of President Trump himself. We'll have a full report straight ahead.